You are listening to the sleepy historian. Settle into your place. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift like wood smoke curling through a hole in a thatched roof. There is no urgency here, no alarm, only the quiet company of a winter long past, spoken softly, as one might whisper to a companion sharing a narrow pallet on the coldest night of the year. Tonight, you are lying on a bed of straw in a single-room peasant cottage somewhere in rural Europe. Perhaps England, perhaps Flanders, perhaps the foothills of the Alps. The year is uncertain. The village name is lost. You are not a knight. You are not a saint. You are not even remembered. And that is exactly why you are here. This is not a tale of castles or crusades, of feasts in great halls or miracles in frozen streams. This is the history of ordinary survival. The ache in your fingers from grinding grain by firelight, the way your breath plumes white even indoors, the quiet dread of hearing a child's cough deepen in the long dark. You are not here to escape winter. You are here to live inside it, one cold, ordinary hour at a time. You may have come hoping for warmth, for rescue, for a story that ends with spring arriving like a herald. But those stories belong to daylight. This is a story for the hours when the fire is low, when the wind has fallen still, when the only sound is the drip of meltwater from the thatch and the soft shuffle of a pig in the corner. And if you fall asleep while listening, if your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing deepens, your mind slips away, do not worry. The story will not leave you. It has waited 700 winters. It can wait a little longer. And if you wake again, you will find yourself still here, in the same dim room, with the same rough blanket, listening to the same quiet truth. Because survival, for most of human history, was not heroic. It was habitual. It was rising before dawn, even when your bones felt like stone. It was chewing coarse bread until your jaw ached just to make it last. It was walking barefoot through frost because your shoes were still drying by the fire. You do not need to understand feudal obligations or manorial law to endure this night. You only need to be present, to feel the cold floor beneath your feet, to smell the damp wool and wood smoke, to hear the low groan of the timber as frost settles into its grain. This is not fiction. This is what winter was for the vast majority of people in medieval Europe. A slow, grinding test of endurance, where danger came not in battles, but in dwindling stores, in damp straw, in the silence that follows a final breath. There will be no sudden noises, no shouting, no music swelling to a climax, only the scrape of a spoon against a wooden bowl, the sigh of a tired body lowering onto straw, the slow tick of a log settling into embers. If this voice helps you rest, if the weight of this history feels like a blanket drawn gently over your thoughts, then a quiet like is welcome. Not a comment, not a share, just the knowledge that you were here, listening as the fire burned low and the night stretched on. Now, let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. Breathe in and out. You are wearing a linen shift, rough against your skin. The thatch above you leaks slightly near the east wall. A pig roots softly in the straw behind the wattle partition. And outside, the first true frost of winter glitters on the fields like scattered salt. You are not important, but you are here. And for now, that is enough. You wake before dawn, not to the crow of a rooster, but to the silence of frozen air. The cottage is colder than it was yesterday. Not dramatically. No biting wind has torn through the thatch, but deeply, quietly colder, as if the night itself has thickened. You lie still for a moment, feeling the stiffness in your joints, the numbness in your toes. Your breath rises in a slow plume above your face, white and dense, vanishing into the gloom near the rafters. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the others. Your spouse murmurs in sleep, but does not wake. Your children are curled together on the far side of the pallet, sharing body heat beneath a single wool blanket. You watch them for breath. 2. Their chests rise and fall in unison. Good. You swing your legs over the edge of the straw and stand. The earthen floor is icy underfoot, colder than it has been all autumn. You do not linger. You walk to the hearth, your bare feet pressing into the packed earth, each step sending a small shiver up your spine. The embers are low, covered in a thin layer of ash. You kneel and stir them gently with the iron poker. A few red eyes glow faintly in the gray. You add a sliver of dry birch bark, saved from summer, kept in a clay pot, and blow softly. The flame catches, weak but steady. You feed another splinter, then a small stick. The fire grows, casting long, trembling shadows on the wattle and daub walls. Now you see it. Frost. Not outside, though you know it is there, but inside. A delicate tracery of ice crystals lines the base of the northern wall, where the cold seeps through the gaps in the daub. It glimmers faintly in the firelight, like lace stitched by winter's own hand. You run a finger along it. It is smooth, hard, cold enough to sting. This is the first true frost, not the light rime of late autumn, gone by mid-morning, but the deep cold that settles into the bones of the world and does not leave. You have been waiting for it, dreading it, preparing for it, and now it is here. You check the water jug. It sits near the door, half filled from yesterday's well draw. You lift the lid and peer inside. A thin film of ice coats the surface. You tap it with your fingernail. It cracks softly, not solid, yet but close. You will not be able to draw water after dusk tomorrow, not without breaking ice from the well bucket first. You return to the pallet and dress. Your linen shift is damp with night sweat. You pull on a wool tunic over it, coarse, undyed, smelling of smoke and sheep. It itches against your skin, but it holds heat. You wrap a woolen scarf around your neck, then pull on hose, wool tubes for your legs, tied at the waist with a leather thong. Your shoes wait by the hearth. Leather, cracked at the seams, stiff with dried mud and frost. You flex them with your hands before pulling them on. They will soften as you walk. You check the firewood. The stack by the door is lower than it was a week ago. You count the logs, 23. Enough for 10 days if you burn 2 per day. But winter is only beginning. You cannot afford that. You decide. 1 log per day, split thin, supplemented with dried dung and furs when the flame dims. It will be smokier, less warm, but it will last. You check the children again. Your youngest stirs, eyes fluttering open. They look at you, bleary and silent, thumb finding their mouth. You lift them gently and carry them to the hearth, sitting on a low stool as the fire grows. You hold them close, sharing your warmth. Their breath warms your collarbone. Their body is light, fragile. You tuck the edge of your tunic around their legs. Outside, the world is pale. Not dark, not light, but caught in that liminal gray that comes just before dawn in deep autumn. You hear no birds, no wind, only the distant lowing of a cow in the next village. The silence is complete. Expectant, you begin your morning routine. Wash with a damp cloth, cold but not icy. Check for lice, 2 nits, crush between your nails. Mend a tear in your tunic, 3 stitches with bone needle and sinew thread. All done slowly, deliberately, without wasted motion. Each task is a small act of resistance against the cold. Your eldest wakes now and joins you by the fire. They say nothing, but begin to card wool with the bone paddles. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The rhythm is steady practiced. You nod. Good. The fire grows stronger. The frost on the wall begins to melt, leaving dark streaks in the daub. The cottage warms, not to comfort, but to survivability. You stir the pot of yesterday's pottage, adding water melted from snow kept in a sack by the door. It will be thin, it will be bland, but it will be warm. You do not look outside yet. You do not need to. You know what you will see. Fields white with frost, trees black against a pale sky, smoke rising from a dozen roofs like silent prayers. Winter has not arrived with fanfare. It has simply settled in, and you are still here. So you rise. You tend a fire. You hold your child close. Because the first true frost is not an event. It is a threshold, and you have just crossed it. The sun barely clears the horizon now. You notice it first in the quality of light. Where once the morning sky blazed gold across the fields, now it offers only a thin, gray wash, pale and hesitant, as if reluctant to commit to the day. By 3 in the afternoon, that light has already begun to fade. By 4, true dark has settled over the village like a heavy cloak. You no longer measure your day in hours. You measure it in tasks completed before the light fails. This morning, you finish grinding barley by the time the sun reaches the oak at the field's edge. Yesterday, you had 2 more hours. Last week, 3. The shortening is slow, almost imperceptible from one day to the next, but cumulative. By midwinter, you will have less than 6 hours of usable light, and every minute of it must be spent wisely. You do not go to the fields anymore. The autumn plowing is done. The seed is stored. The earth is too hard to work, the air too cold to stand in for long. All labor now happens indoors or very near the cottage, where you can retreat to the hearth if your fingers begin to stiffen. Your eldest sits by the fire, carding wool. Their movements are slow but steady, the bone paddles drawing coarse fibers into alignment. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound is soft, rhythmed, hypnotic. It does not require full attention, only presence. And presence is what you have in abundance during these long, dark days. You take your own seat on the low stool and pull out the mending basket. Your tunic from yesterday has a new tear at the elbow, caught on a splinter while fetching wood. You thread your bone needle with sinew, not the end, and begin to stitch. Small, even stitches. Not for beauty, but for function. A loose seam invites cold. Cold invites fatigue. Fatigue invites error. Your hands move slowly, not from laziness, but from cold. Even near the fire, your fingers ache with a deep, persistent stiffness that never fully leaves. You flex them between stitches, watching the knuckles whiten, then flush red as blood returns. You do not rush. Rushing wastes thread. Thread is precious. Outside, the world is silent. No wind stirs the bare branches. No animals call. Even the distant bark of a dog has ceased. The village holds its breath. You hear only the crackle of the fire, the soft shuffle of the pig in the byre, the steady scritch of the wool paddles. Your youngest sleeps on the pallet, wrapped in a shared blanket. Their breathing is slow, even. Good. You watch them for a long moment. Not with anxiety, but with assessment. They are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. That is all you can guarantee. You think of the stores. The grain sack in the corner sags slightly more each day. You measure it last night by touch, less than 2/3 full. The salt pork is down to scraps. The firewood stack is half what it was at All Saints. You do not panic. Panic is a luxury. You simply adjust. 1 less spoon of barley in the pottage. 1 thinner slice of pork. 1 less log on the fire. Time passes differently now. In summer, the day was a river, flowing fast, carrying you from dawn chores to field work to evening meal in a rush of heat and motion. Now it is a pond, still deep, unmoving. You sit by the hearth for hours, stirring the pot, mending clothes, watching the flames. There is no urgency, only duration. You check the water jug again. The ice film is thicker today. You chip it away with the back of a spoon and pour a small amount into the pot for tea. You do not boil it for cleanliness. You boil it because cold water chills you from the inside, and you cannot afford that. Warmth, even in a sip of weak herb tea, is survival. Your spouse returns from checking the pig's trough. Their cheeks are flush from the cold, their breath pluming white. They nod to you, no words needed, and take their place by the fire, pulling off damp gloves to warm their hands. You hand them the wooden mug. They drink half, hand it back. You drink the rest. Sharing is not generosity. It is necessity. As dusk approaches, earlier than yesterday, you light no lamp. You cannot afford the oil. Instead, you move closer to the fire, letting its dim glow guide your hands. Your eldest sets aside the wool and begins to braid straw for basket lining. Their fingers fumble in the low light, but they do not stop. Idle hands grow stiff. Stiff hands cannot work. You finish your mending and lay the tunic aside. You rub your hands together, then tuck them under your armpits to warm them. Your back aches from sitting. Your eyes feel gritty from straining in the dim light. But you do not lie down. Not yet. There is still light enough to check the seed chest, to oil the harness, to sharpen the flint. Because the days are short, but the nights are long, and in the long dark, every small task completed is a quiet act of defiance. You do not fight winter. You live inside it, hour by hour, breath by breath, stitch by stitch. And as the last gray light fades from the sky, you bank the fire, pull the blanket tighter, and wait for morning, knowing it will come, a little later than yesterday. Night falls early, and when it does, the cottage becomes one room for all who live in it, human and animal alike. You close the wooden shutter over the small window and bar the door against the cold. There is no lock, only a heavy timber slid into place. It will not keep out wolves, not truly, but it eases the mind, and a calm mind sleeps deeper. And sleep, in winter, is not a luxury. It is conservation. You bank the fire, not to extinguish it, never that, but to slow its burn. You cover the embers with a layer of ash, then place one last thin log on top. It will smolder through the night, giving off just enough heat to keep the cottage from freezing solid. Smoke will pool near the rafters, then drift downward, stinging your eyes if you lie too close. But you're used to it. Smoke is part of the air now, like breath, like silence. You prepare the pallet. It lies in the warmest corner of the room, farthest from the door, closest to the hearth. Straw, layered thick in autumn, is now packed flat from weeks of use, damp in spots from sweat and condensation. You fluff it as best you can, then spread the shared wool blanket over the top. It is thin, threadbare in places, but clean, or as clean as it can be. You do not wash bedding in winter. Water is too precious. Instead, you air it by the fire for an hour each afternoon, letting the heat draw out the damp. Your family gathers. Your spouse removes their outer tunic and sits on the edge of the pallet, rubbing their hands together to warm them. Your eldest child curls up near the wall, pulling their knees to their chest. Your youngest waits by the hearth, wrapped in a second scrap of wool, eyes heavy with sleep. You do not assign places. You never have. The arrangement has formed itself through need. The smallest in the middle for warmth, the strongest on the outside to block drafts, the adults on the edges to rise first in the night for fire tending or water fetching. You lie down. The straw crackles beneath you, releasing the sour-sweet smell of old hay and human warmth. You pull the blanket over your shoulders, tucking the edges around your neck. Your spouse lies behind you, back to back, sharing heat without touch beyond necessity. Your youngest nestles into the space between you, their small body radiating a fragile warmth that surprises you every night. You are close, too close by summer standards. But in winter, closeness is survival. Your breath rises in soft plumes, visible even in the dim firelight. So does theirs. For a long time, you simply listen to the rhythm of their breathing, to the soft rustle of wool, to the slow crackle of the fire. And out, you match your breath to theirs, not consciously, but instinctively, as if your lungs remember how to conserve oxygen, how to share air. The pig stirs in the byre. Separated only by a wattle and daub partition, the animal shifts in its straw, snuffling softly. Its body heat seeps through the wall, a dull, steady warmth that you have learned to rely on. You do not resent sharing your home with livestock. In deep winter, their presence is a gift. Their breath humidifies the air. Their movement stirs the cold. Their life reminds you that you are not alone in the dark. Silence settles. Not empty silence, but full. The kind that hums in your ears after a day of noise. The kind that wraps around you like a second blanket. You do not speak. Words take breath. Breath carries heat. And heat is too precious to waste on conversation when all that matters is presence. Your mind drifts. You think of nothing grand. No dreams of spring. No memories of summer feasts. Only the feel of your child's back rising and falling against your arm. Only the ache in your lower back from sitting too long by the fire. Only the slow, steady certainty that you are all here, together, for one more night. Outside, the cold deepens. You hear it in the creak of the timber as frost settles into the grain. In the faint groan of the thatch as ice forms on its underside. In the absolute stillness of a world holding its breath. But inside, you are warm enough. Not comfortable. Never comfortable, but warm enough to last until dawn. Your youngest sighs in their sleep, a small, contented sound. You shift slightly to ease the pressure on your hip, but do not pull away. Movement wastes heat. You let your body grow still, your breathing slow, your thoughts thin. Time stretches, not in hours, but in breaths, in heartbeats, in the slow burn of a log turning to ash. You do not fear the long night. You have lived through many. You know its rhythm, its patience, its quiet demands. And you meet them, as you always have, not with courage, but with continuity, because winter does not ask for heroism. It asks only that you remain, that you share your warmth, that you listen to the breath of those beside you, and know, in the dark, that they're still here. And so you rest, not deeply, never deeply, but enough. Enough to face the cold morning, enough to rise again. For now, this closeness is enough. You wake in the deep dark, not to a sound, not to a cry, but to a feeling, a subtle shift in the air. The fire has dipped too low. The embers are gray, the warmth barely reaching the pallet. If it goes out now, in the coldest part of the night, the cottage will freeze before dawn. Frost will form on the walls, on the water jug, on your children's lips. You cannot let that happen. You rise without speaking. Your body protests, stiff from hours of stillness, cold seeping through the thin blanket. But you move slowly, deliberately, conserving what little warmth you have. You pad barefoot across the earthen floor, your breath pluming white in the dark. The pig stirs in the byre, but does not wake fully. Good. Even animals know to conserve energy in winter. You kneel by the hearth. The ash is cold to the touch. You stir it gently with the iron poker. A few dull red eyes blink in the gray. Not enough. You blow softly, coaxing them alive. Nothing. You add a sliver of birch bark, the last of your dry kindling, and blow again. This time, a tiny flame licks upward, fragile as a moth's wing. You feed another splinter, then a small stick. Your breath comes in short, controlled puffs, visible, vanishing essential. The flame grows, not brightly, never brightly, but enough. It casts long, trembling shadows on the wattle walls, warms your face just enough to remind you that heat is still possible. You add one thin log, split fine, dried for months, and settle back on your heels. You will not return to the pallet yet. You must watch. You must wait. A fire left unattended in deep winter is a risk you cannot afford. You sit on a low stool, your cloak pulled tight around your shoulders. Your hands are numb. You tuck them under your armpits, letting your body heat seep into your fingers. You do not rub them. Rubbing wastes energy. You simply wait, watching the log catch, watching the smoke curl toward the hole in the thatch. It does not rise cleanly. On still nights like this, it eddies in the rafters, then drifts downward, stinging your eyes. You blink slowly. Let the tears clear your vision. Smoke is not an enemy. It is a companion. It means the fire lives. You think of the fuel. The stack by the door is lower again. You counted 23 logs 10 days ago. Now perhaps 15. At this rate, you will run out before Candlemas. You cannot cut more. The ground is frozen. The trees brittle. You will have to rely on furs, on dried dung, on the branches scavenged from the hedgerow. They burn fast. They smoke more, but they burn. You check the water jug. The ice is thicker tonight. You chip at it with the back of a spoon, just enough to pour a splash into the pot. You set it near the fire to melt. Not for drinking, yet, but for tomorrow's pottage. Water takes hours to thaw in this cold. You must begin now, even in the middle of the night. Your youngest stirs on the pallet. You glance over. They shift onto their side, thumb finding their mouth, but do not wake. Good. Sleep is precious. You do not call out. You do not go to them. To move now is to lose heat. And your presence by the fire is more valuable than comfort. You watch the flame. It dances softly, casting flickering light on the grain sack in the corner, on the mending basket, on the bone needle left on the stool. Shadows stretch and shrink. The cottage breathes with the fire, expanding in warmth, contracting in cold. You know this rhythm as well as your own breath. This is not comfort. This is vigilance. The fire is not for warmth alone. It is for water, for cooking, for melting snow, for keeping the damp at bay, for signaling to your family that the night has not won. As long as the fire burns, you are still fighting. Quietly, steadily, Without fanfare. You think of last winter, of the cottage 2 fields over where the fire died one night in January. The family woke to a frozen hearth, a frozen jug, a child too cold to cry. They survived, but barely. They spent the rest of winter huddled in the Lord's barn, trading labor for a corner near the oxen. You do not want that. You do not want to owe. You want only to keep your own hearth alive. The log settles with a soft crack. Embers spill onto the stone hearth. You sweep them back with a poker. You add another sliver of wood, not from the main stack, but from the kindling pot. Every piece matters. Your spouse stirs. They sit up, look at you, then at the fire. They nod. No words. They rise, wrap their cloak around their shoulders, and join you by the hearth. They take the poker, stir the embers, add a pinch of dried moss to help the flame catch. You shift on the stool to make room. They sit beside you, not touching, just present. You share the watch, not out of distrust, but out of partnership. 2 sets of eyes, 2 pairs of hands. Double the chance that the fire will last until dawn. Outside, the world is utterly still. No wind, no animal calls, not even the groan of timber, just the quiet hum of deep cold pressing against the walls. You feel in your bones, but inside the fire breathes. And as long as it breathes, so do you. You do not speak. You do not need to. You simply sit, watching the flame, guarding the heat, refusing to let the night win. Because in winter, the fire must not die, and so you do not sleep. You measure the grain by hand now. Not with a cup or a scale. Those are summer tools, but with your palm. You reach into the sack in the corner, fingers closing around cool, dry barley. You lift a double handful and let it spill slowly back into the sack, watching how much resistance it offers. Less than last week. Less than yesterday. The grain is running low. You do not panic. Panic burns calories, and calories are scarce. Instead, you adjust. Today, you take only 1 handful for the morning pottage. You will stretch it with extra water, with a few dried peas, with the last scrap of onion saved from autumn. It will be thin. It will not satisfy, but it will quiet the hollow feeling in your children's bellies long enough to get through the morning. You carry the grain to the cornstone. It sits near the hearth, where the faint warmth keeps the wood from cracking. You kneel on the straw, your knees pressing into the cold floor, and pour the barley between the 2 flat stones. Your arms ache before you even begin, the deep, familiar throb left over from yesterday's labor. But you start turning, round and round and round. The barley crunches between the stones, slowly yielding into coarse flour. Husks and grit mix with the powder, but you do not sift it. Sifting wastes time and grain. Every particle counts. You grind slowly, steadily, using your whole arm, your shoulder, your core. 2 hours for enough to thicken 1 pot of pottage. You do not rush. Rushing flings kernels into the air, and kernels lost are meals lost. Your eldest watches from the pallet. They do not speak, but their eyes follow your hands. They see the care you take, the way you scoop every last bit of flour from the stone into the wooden bowl. They are learning. They understand that hunger is not an emergency. It is arithmetic. You mix the flour with water melted from snow. The pot has been warming by the fire since last night. You stir the mixture slowly, watching it thicken from cloudy water to a pale, gritty slurry. You add a pinch of salt, the last in the pouch, and a single dried pea for flavor. No meat. The salt pork is gone, save for a rind boiling in the stew pot for broth. You do not expect more. The pottage simmers. Not a rolling boil, never that, but a gentle bubble at the edges, enough to warm it through without wasting fuel. You lift the pot from the hook and set it on a flat stone to cool slightly. Too hot, and it will scald mouths. Too cold, and it will chill you from the inside. You must find a balance. Wooden bowls come out, chipped, but serviceable. You ladle the pottage slowly, evenly. Not generous portions, but enough to quiet the hunger. Your youngest gets the most broth, the least grain, easier to digest. Your spouse takes the pea. You take the smallest portion, not from sacrifice, but from habit. The one who tends a fire eats last. Your children drink from wooden mugs, weak ale brewed from barley, slightly sour. You do not give them water. The well is shallow, fed by runoff from the fields. Ale is safer. Even weak, it carries calories. Even sour, it does not carry rot. You eat with your fingers. Spoons are for stirring, not serving. The pottage is bland, gritty with barley husks, but warm. You chew slowly, not for enjoyment. You barely taste it, but to stretch the meal, to give your stomach time to register fullness. You sip from your bowl, letting the warmth travel down your throat and into your core. Your youngest finishes quickly and looks to you with wide eyes. You shake your head gently. No more. They look down but do not cry. They have learned. Hunger is not injustice. It is arithmetic. After the meal, you rinse the bowls with a splash of water from the jug, just enough to loosen the residue. You set them upside down on the stool to dry. Water is too precious to waste on cleanliness when survival is the priority. You check the grain sack again. It sags noticeably now, the fabric loose against the stone slab where it rests. You run your hand along its side, feeling the emptiness. Perhaps a third remains. Perhaps less. You close your eyes and calculate. If you use 1 handful per day, it will last 12 more days. But winter stretches for weeks beyond that. You cannot stretch it further. Not without risking malnutrition, weakness, the kind of fatigue that leads to mistakes that cannot be undone. You think of alternatives. Acorns, gathered in autumn and stored in a clay jar under the floor. You will leach their bitterness with repeated soakings, then grind them into flour. The bread will be dark, dense, slightly bitter, but it will fill bellies. Tree bark, inner cambium layer, dried and powdered, can be mixed with grain to stretch it further. Lichen from the north side of oaks, boiled for hours, adds bulk, if not nutrition. These are not choices of preference. They're choices of necessity. You do not tell your children this. They do not need to know yet. Let them believe for a few more days. That the grain will hold. You sit by the fire and rest your hands on your knees. The hollow feeling is quieter now, but not gone. It never truly leaves this time of year. It sits in your belly like a guest who will not depart, reminding you with every breath that survival is not abundance. It is management. It is knowing how little you can live on and making that little last. Your eldest begins to card wool again, their movements slower now, conserving energy. Your spouse sharpens a bone needle, preparing to mend a tear in a hose. No one speaks. Words are saved for necessity. The silence is not empty. It is full of shared understanding. You watch the fire. Flames curl around the thin log, orange and gold against the black. Smoke drifts upward, then eddies back down, stinging your eyes. You blink slowly, letting the tears clear your vision. You do not move away. The smoke is part of the room, as much as the straw or the wattle walls. To avoid it is to avoid life. You think of your parents. Did they sit like this, in a cottage much like this one, watching their children learn to endure hunger? You do not remember their faces clearly. Time and fatigue have blurred them, but you remember their silence. The same quiet presence you now offer your own children. Survival is not taught in words. It is modeled in stillness. Your youngest curls back onto the pallet, pulling the blanket over their shoulders. Their eyes close. Their breathing slows. Good. You rise and go to the grain sack one last time. You tie the leather thong tightly, then place a heavy pot on top to deter mice. You check the clay jars buried in the floor. Acorns, bark, dried herbs. All still sealed. All still holding. You return to the fire and sit. Your body is tired. Your mind is quiet. Your belly is not full, but is not empty. That is enough, because in this cottage, hunger is not an emergency. It is a condition, and you have learned to live inside it. You do not pray for more grain. You pray only for the strength to make what you have last until the thaw, and as the fire dims once more. You watch. You wait. You endure. You do not discard anything. Not a scrap of cloth, not a splinter of wood, not a single strand of sinew. In winter, waste is not carelessness, it is risk. Every object that can be repaired is worth more than its weight in grain, because to replace it would cost time, fuel, and energy you cannot spare. So you mend. You begin with your shoes. They sit by the hearth, stiff with dried mud and frost, the leather cracked at the ball from weeks of walking on frozen earth. You pull out the bow and awl and the spool of sinew thread, stronger than flax, more durable than wool, and kneel on the straw. Your hands are still stiff from the morning's grinding, but you warm them over the fire before beginning. You work slowly, punching holes just ahead of the stitch, pulling the thread taut, but not tight. Too tight, and the leather will tear when it flexes. Too loose, and snow will seep in, melt against your skin, and chill you to the bone. You know the balance by feel, by years of trial. Each stitch is small, even deliberate. You do not count them. You do not need to. Your fingers remember. Your eldest watches from the pallet. They hold a torn sock in their lap, turning it over in their hands. You do not instruct. You simply continue your work. After a moment, they pick up a bone needle and begin to stitch, mimicking your motion. Their stitches are uneven, too large, but they are trying. Good. Skill is not taught in words. It is learned through repetition, through quiet observation, through the slow accumulation of small successes. You move to your tunic next. The tear at the elbow has frayed further. You trim the loose threads with your teeth, too fine for the knife, and reinforce the edge with a strip of scrap linen saved from last summer's weaving. You sew it in place with tiny overcast stitches, working the needle in and out with slow, steady motions. The firelight is dim, but your eyes are used to it. You do not need brightness. You need only enough to see the edge of the fabric, the eye of the needle. Your spouse works nearby, oiling the harness for the ox. Not because Boda needs it today, the beast rests in the pen, conserving energy, but because dry leather cracks and cracked harness means lost days in the field come spring. They rub mutton tallow into the straps with slow, deliberate strokes, working it into every seam. The smell is sharp, animal, familiar. It fills the cottage, mingling with wood smoke and damp straw. You check the tools. The iron blade of your knife is dull but sound. You draw it across a smooth river stone, wet with spit, until it can catch a hair. You do not test it on your thumb. You know by sound, the high, clean whisper of true sharpness. The wooden handle of your spoon is worn smooth, but uncracked. The bone needle is intact, its eye unchipped. Good. These will last. You teach your eldest to tie knots. Not the simple overhand they've used for years, but the fisherman's bend, the clove hitch, the bowline that holds under tension but releases with a pull. You use a length of old rope, frayed but strong, and guide their fingers through each loop, each tuck. They fumble at first. You do not sigh. You show them again, and again, until their hands remember what their mind has not yet learned. These tasks have no urgency, no deadline, no audience, but they matter, because survival is not won in moments of crisis. It is built in the quiet hours between, hour after hour, day after day, season after season, through the repetition of small, necessary acts, through the refusal to let tools rot, to let skills fade, to let readiness slip. Your hands move without hurry. Your breath stays even. Your mind drifts, then returns. You think of nothing grand. No dreams of better cloth. No fantasies of new shoes. Only the feel of sinew thread between your fingers. The smell of tallow and smoke. The sound of your child's quiet concentration as they stitch. Outside, the light fades early. You notice it as you hang the mended shoes by the fire to dry. The sky already gray at mid-afternoon. Shadows stretch, but they do not swallow the world whole. There is still time, just enough to finish a task before night falls. Your youngest brings you a broken spindle whorl. You take it, turn it in your palm. The wood is split, the hole misshapen. You do not discard it. You find a scrap of leather, cut a small patch, and bind it tightly around the break with sinew. It will not spin as true, but it will spin. That is enough. You go to bed earlier than in autumn, but not from fatigue alone, from contentment. The day has been full, not with drama, not with danger, but with purpose, with the quiet certainty that you are still preparing, still tending, still ready. You lie on the pallet, your body aching in familiar places, your hands calloused and stiff. You pull the blanket over your shoulders. Your eldest sleeps beside you, their breathing slow and even. Your spouse stirs the embers one last time before lying down. The fire crackles softly. The thatch drips once. The pig snuffles in the byre. And in the rhythm of mending, you find not hope, but continuity, not salvation, but the quiet dignity of going on. The wind has stopped, not for an hour, not for a night, but for days. The kind of stillness that feels less like calm and more like suspension, as if the world itself has forgotten to breathe. Outside, the snow lies undisturbed, a seamless white blanket over field and fence, over hedgerow and well. No tracks, no drifts, just silence, thick and unbroken. You notice it first in your own breath. It rises in slow, steady plumes, white and dense, vanishing into the rafters without resistance. No wind to carry it away. No cold snap to sharpen its edge. Just the quiet exhalation of a body enduring. You sit by the hearth, not because you are cold, though you are, but because there is nothing else to do. The grain is measured. The shoes are mended. The fire is banked. The children sleep. The day stretches before you, empty of tasks, full of time. And time, in deep winter, is not a gift. It is a weight. You watch the fire. Flames curl lazily around the thin log, casting long, trembling shadows on the wattle walls. Smoke pools near the ceiling, then drifts downward, stinging your eyes. You do not move away. You blink slowly, letting the tears clear your vision. Smoke is not an enemy. It is proof that the fire lives. And as long as the fire lives, you do too. Your thoughts grow short, not scattered, not frantic, but pared down to the essentials. You no longer plan for next week. You think only of the next meal, the next log, the next hour. Grand thoughts of spring, of harvest, of years ahead have fallen away like leaves in autumn. What remains is immediate, tactile, necessary. You run your fingers along the edge of your tunic. The mend at the elbow holds. The wool is still dry. Good. You check your hands. Knuckles cracked, nails rimmed with dirt, but no open sores. Good. You shift on the stool, easing the ache in your lower back. Not gone, never gone, but manageable. Your eldest sits nearby, braiding straw into rope. Their movements are slow, almost meditative. Pull, twist, tuck. The rhythm is steady, practiced, hypnotic. They do not look up. They do not need to. Their body knows the motion. Their mind is elsewhere, perhaps in dreams of green fields, perhaps in the quiet space between waking and sleep. You do not speak. Words feel intrusive in this stillness. Too sharp, too warm. You have learned to conserve even your voice. So you sit in silence, listening to the soft rustle of straw, the crackle of the fire, the slow drip of meltwater from the thatch into the bowl by the door. Plink, plink, like a timer, counting down nothing in particular. Time blurs. Is it midday? Late afternoon? You check the light through the shutter crack. Pale, gray, unchanging. Without the sun's arc, hours lose meaning. You measure time now by meals, by the number of logs burned, by the slow shift of your children's breathing as they drift from sleep to wakefulness and back again. You think of nothing, not deliberately, not as meditation, but because your mind has grown tired of carrying weight. It lets go. It rests. It floats in the quiet space between thought and sensation. You feel the rough wool of your tunic against your neck, the warmth of the fire on your face, the cold floor beneath your feet. That is enough. Your spouse stirs the embers. They add a pinch of dried moss to keep the flame alive. They do not look at you. You do not look at them, but you feel their presence like a second hearth, steady, warm, reliable. You do not need words to say, "We are still here." Your shared silence says it for you. The pig shifts in the byre. A soft snuffle, then stillness. Even the animal senses the depth of this quiet. It conserves its energy as you do. It waits as you do. You close your eyes. Not to sleep. Sleep is too risky in the coldest part of the day, but to rest. To let your body soften, your breath slow, your thoughts dissolve. You drift. You hover. You return. In this stillness, even thinking takes effort. Even remembering your own name feels like lifting a stone. And yet, you remain. You breathe. You listen. Because the stillness of deep winter is not empty. It is full of waiting, of endurance, of the quiet strength it takes to sit, hour after hour, and do nothing but survive. And so you sit, you watch, you wait, not for change, not for rescue, but for the simple, quiet proof that you are still here. Thought grows shorter in the endless night, not weaker, not slower, but shorter, like sentences cut off before they finish, like paths that end at a wall of snow. You begin to notice it in your own mind. You start to recall your mother's face, and halfway through, the image slips away. You try to remember the name of your childhood's dream, and the word hovers just out of reach like a fish beneath ice. This is not madness. It is adaptation. The mind, like the body, conserves what it can. And in the deep winter dark, thoughts are expensive. They burn fuel. They stir the heart. They invite longing. So the mind folds inward, shedding memories that do not serve survival. It keeps only what is necessary. How to tie a knot, how to grind grain, how to ration a handful of barley. The rest, the names of songs, the taste of summer berries, the feel of rain on bare skin, those fade like ink in the cold. You catch yourself staring at the fire for minutes at a time, not thinking, not dreaming, just watching embers pulse faintly in the dark. Your eyes do not move. Your breath slows. For a moment, there is no you, only the quiet presence of a body in a room, waiting. Others do the same. Your eldest sits by the wall, braiding the same length of straw over and over, undoing it, rebraiding it. No purpose, only motion. Your spouse sharpens a knife that does not need sharpening, drawing the blade across the stone with slow, redundant strokes. No one speaks to them. No one interrupts. These are not signs of distress. They are rituals of endurance, small anchors thrown into the sea of monotony. Sleep blurs with waking. You dream of open fields, of green shoots pushing through dark earth, of voices calling your name. And when you wake, you are not sure the dream has ended. You reach for a cup that isn't there. You answer a question no one asked. You speak to a companion who is not in the room, and no one corrects you, because they have done the same. You begin to count things, not for record keeping, but for focus. The number of nails in the ceiling beam above your pallet, 39. The notches you've carved in the doorframe, 62. The spoonfuls of pottage you drink each day, 2. You count your breaths as you lie in the dark. In 2, 3 out, 2, 3. Sometimes you lose count at 12. Sometimes you reach 100 and start again. It does not matter. The counting is not for completion. It is to keep the mind from drifting too far. One night, your spouse hums the same tune every evening. You do not know its name. It has no words, just a few notes, repeated, soft as breath. You hear it through the thin blanket between you. At first, it annoyed you. Then it comforted you. Now, you notice when it stops. You wait for it to begin again. It always does. Books go unread. Not because you own many. You have one, a psalter with smudged ink and cracked binding, but because reading requires a kind of attention that feels reckless now. To lose yourself in words is to forget where you are. And forgetting, even for a moment, is dangerous. So the book stays closed, wrapped in oiled cloth, stored on the highest shelf. You speak less, even to yourself. The inner monologue that once narrated your days. I'll check the fire. The grain is low. That cough sounds worse, has grown quiet. You simply do. You rise. You eat. You mend. You sleep. No commentary. No reflection. Only action. And yet in this quieting of the mind, you notice things you never did before. The way frost crystals grow in branching patterns along the wattle wall. The exact pitch of the pig's snuffle when it dreams. The rhythm of your youngest breathing when fever is not near. These details become your world. Not grand, not beautiful, but real, present, enough. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, you ask yourself a question. Am I still me? Not the person who danced at summer weddings or walked barefoot through river shallows, but this person, thin, quiet, slow, who measures life in logs burned and handfuls of grain. You do not answer. You do not need to, because identity, like warmth, is a luxury, and survival requires only presence. So you let the old self go, piece by piece, memory by memory, until all that remains is the person who can sit in the long dark and not flinch, Who can eat thin pottage and feel full? Who can hear silence and not fear it? You're not less. You're a pair down, like driftwood smoothed by the sea, and in the long dark. That is enough. You notice it first at dawn, not because the light is bright. It isn't. The sky is still gray, the sun hidden behind banks of cloud, but because the cottage is too quiet. Your youngest does not stir when you rise. They do not murmur in their sleep. They do not reach for you with small, cold hands. They lie on the pallet, curled on their side, exactly as they were when you last checked in the deep night. Their blanket is tucked neatly under their chin. Their thumb rests near their mouth, but their lips are slightly parted. You watch their chest. It does not rise. You do not move at once. You stand at the foot of the pallet, listening, not for breath, but for the absence of it. The silence is complete. No soft inhale, no sigh, no rustle of straw as they shift. Just stillness. You kneel. Your knees press into the cold floor, but you do not feel it. You place a hand on their chest, over the rough wool of their shift. The skin is cool, not icy, just cool like stone left in the shade. You wait. One breath. Two. Nothing. You do not cry. You do not call out. You simply sit back on your heels and close your eyes. This is not unexpected. Not truly. The cough came 3 nights ago, soft at first, then deeper, wetter, rattling in their small chest. You held them through the night, rocking slowly, humming the same tune your mother once hummed. You gave them the last spoonful of honey, the warmest corner of the blanket, the softest straw. You did what you could, and still the cold took them. Your spouse wakes now. They see your posture, your stillness, and understand. They rise without a word and come to kneel beside you. They do not touch the child. They do not speak. They simply place a hand on your shoulder, a brief, heavy pressure, and then rise to tend the fire. The fire must not die, not even now. Your eldest stirs. They sit up, rubbing sleep from their eyes, and look from you to the pallet. Their face does not crumple. They are too tired for tears, too worn for grief. They simply nod, as if confirming a fact they already knew, and wrap their arms around their knees. You smooth your youngest's hair back from their forehead. It is fine, pale, tangled with bits of straw. You tuck a loose strand behind their ear. You adjust the blanket, pulling it up to their chin as you would on any other morning. You do not close their eyes. They are already closed. There is no ceremony. No bell tolls. No priest comes. No one gathers to sing. This is not a manor house, where death is marked with candles and psalms. This is a peasant cottage in the heart of winter, where survival is measured in breaths, and some simply run out. You and your spouse lift the small body gently. You wrap them in a clean scrap of wool, safe for mending, but clean, and carry them to the driest corner of the byre, away from the pig. You lay them on a bed of fresh straw and cover them with another blanket. You cannot bury them yet. The ground is frozen solid, 2 feet deep. To dig would take days, fuel, strength you do not have. So they wait. Like everything else in winter, they wait for the thaw. You return to the cottage. You do not speak of them. Not yet. But you see the glances. The way your eldest avoids the empty space on the pallet. The way your spouse leaves an extra spoonful of pottage in the pot for one more day, then quietly empties it into the stew. Waste is not permitted, not even in death. You sit by the fire. Your hands rest on your knees. Your breath is slow, even. You do not feel the hollow ache you expected. You feel only fatigue, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that has no beginning and no end. You think of the cough, the fever that never came, the way their breathing grew quieter each hour. You did not fail. You endured. And sometimes endurance is not enough. Outside, the world remains still. No wind, no birds, no sign that anything has changed. The snow lies undisturbed. The fields stretch white and empty. Life goes on, not because it should, but because it must. You check the grain sack. Still a little left. You check the firewood. Still enough for a week. You check your eldest. Their eyes are dry, but their hands are busy, braiding straw, mending a tear, doing the next small thing. You rise and go to the corn stone. You take your usual handful of barley. You grind it slowly, evenly, as you have done every morning for weeks. Your arms ache. Your back throbs. Your heart is quiet, because morning did not come for them, but still comes for you. And that is a burden as much as a gift. You do not stop. You do not pause. You simply continue, not for hope, not for meaning, but because to stop is to join the stillness. And you're still here. So you grind. You stir the pot. You tend the fire. You live. One cold, ordinary hour at a time. It begins with a lightness in the air. Not warmth. Not yet, but a subtle shift in the quality of the dark. The blackness of deep winter softens at the edges, as if diluted with milk. The stars, once sharp and constant, begin to fade earlier each night. And then, one morning, you step to the door and see it. A thin, pale line along the eastern horizon. Not the sun itself. Not yet, but the sky remembering it. You do not rush outside. You do not call your family. You simply stand in the doorway, cloak pulled tight, and watch. The snow-covered fields glow silver in the low light. The bare branches of the oak at the field's edge stand black against the pale sky. And the air, though still cold, feels different. Less dense, less final. This is the first pale dawn. It lasts only minutes. The glow swells, peaks, then recedes, but it leaves something behind. A memory of color. A promise, not of rescue, but of change. You go back inside, your heart quieter than you expect. You do not feel joy. You feel caution. Hope is dangerous here. It burns too brightly, then leaves you colder when it fades. But still, you mark the day. In the cottage, you carve a deeper notch in the doorframe. Not just another tally. This one is wider, deliberate. A record not of endurance, but of transition. Your eldest notices, nods, says nothing. But that evening, they stand at the door longer than usual, scanning the eastern sky. The days lengthen slowly. 10 minutes more of twilight. Then 20. Then an hour. The darkness no longer presses down with the same weight. It lifts inch by inch, like a heavy blanket being drawn back. You begin to see your breath less. Not because the air is warmer, it is still below freezing, but because the light reflects differently off the vapor. It glows faintly in the early morning, a ghostly plume against the lavender sky. Outside, the snow shows no sign of melting. It remains deep, unbroken, pristine. But you watch it differently now. You look for cracks, for the subtle darkening that means the sun is beginning to eat away at its edges. You walk to the well and chip ice from a bucket. Today, it breaks more easily. Tomorrow, it may not freeze at all. Inside, routines do not change. Rations remain tight. The fire still burns measured fuel. Your eldest still cards wool. You still grind grain by the hearth. But something has shifted in the air. A quiet alertness, like animals sensing spring before the snow melts. You find yourself standing in the doorway more often, even when not fetching wood. Not waiting for rescue. Rescue is still a fantasy, but watching for possibility. The light reveals details you hadn't seen in months. The grain of the snow, the texture of frost on the well rope, the way shadows fall across the hedgerow. The world regains its contours. One afternoon, you see your shadow for the first time in months. It is faint, stretched long across the snow, but unmistakable. You look down at your boots, then at the dark shape beside them. You shift your weight. The shadow shifts with you. You feel a strange surge, not of happiness, but of proof. You are still here, still casting a shadow, still part of the world of light and form. You do not tell anyone. You do not need to. They feel it too. Sleep changes. You still dream of green fields and running water, but the dreams feel less like escapes and more like memories returning. You wake less often in the night. Your body senses the lengthening days, even if your mind does not trust them. The cold remains. Your fingers still stiffen on the stoop. Your boots still freeze overnight. Your breath still plumes in the air. But now, when you return inside, the contrast with the fire's warmth feels sharper, more meaningful. Light and dark, cold and heat, absence and return. You begin to clean things, not out of order, but out of expectation. You brush frost from your cloak more thoroughly. You polish your knife with extra care. You wash your face with melted snow, not just to remove grime, but to feel the sting of water on skin. These are not acts of vanity. They are acts of preparation for whatever comes next. One morning, you see a crow. Not a flock, not a cry overhead. Just one bird, distant and black against the gray sky, circling once before vanishing north. You do not mention it at first. You think you imagined it. But the next day, your eldest points silently to the horizon. There it is again, waiting. Life is returning. Not for you, but around you. The sun climbs higher each day. It no longer schemes the horizon. It arcs above it, weak but undeniable. Shadows shorten. Snow begins to soften at midday, forming a crust that holds your weight without sinking. You leave footprints now. Clear, crisp impressions that last until the next frost. You watch the fire. It still needs tending. But now, when you add a log, you imagine the day you will not need to bank it so tightly. The day you can leave the door open for an hour without fear. The day your eldest will walk to the strip and begin to harrow the soil. You do not speak of these things. You simply prepare, because after the long night, even the smallest light is a kind of homecoming. And so you stand in the doorway, cloak pulled tight, breath pluming faintly, and let the pale dawn touch your face. You do not wait for spring to arrive. You prepare for its possibility, not with celebration, not with certainty, but with the quiet, methodical care of someone who has learned that hope is dangerous unless it is paired with action. You do not speak of green shoots or soft earth. You simply begin the work that must be done if the thaw comes. If not this week, then next. If not this year, then the one after. You take down the scythe from its peg near the rafters. The blade is dull, nicked from last harvest, but sound. You run your thumb along the edge, then set on the stool by the fire. You will sharpen it tonight when the light holds long enough to see the whetstone's grit. You check the wooden handle, dry, uncracked, ready. You oil the hinge where the blade meets the snaft, working mutton tallow into the joint until it moves smoothly. This is not optimism. It is readiness. Your eldest watches you as you work. They do not ask what you're doing. They know. They bring you the whetstone from the shelf, the one wrapped in oilcloth to keep it from cracking in the cold. You nod your thanks. They sit nearby, mending a tear in their hose, but their eyes follow your hands. They are learning. They understand that survival is not a single act, but a series of small preparations strung together across seasons. You check the seed chest. It sits buried in the floor, sealed with clay to keep out moisture and mice. You scrape away the dried mud, lift the wooden lid, and peer inside. The barley seeds are dry, dark whole. No mold, no rot. Good. You run your fingers through them, feeling their weight, their density. Each one is a promise. Each one is a gamble. You close the chest, reseal it with fresh clay, and cover it with straw. Outside, the snow is still deep. But you walk to the strip anyway. Not to work, but to assess. You check the furrows you turned in autumn. Still frozen, but the frost on the surface glistens differently in the low sun. Less brittle, more reflective. You kneel and press your palm to the earth. Cold, yes, but not dead. Beneath the crust, the soil holds a faint dampness, a memory of liquid. You do not plow. Not yet. But you walk the length of your strip, kicking loose stones to the edge, checking for animal tracks. None for flooding, none. You return home and begin to mend the fences. Not because they are broken, winter has left them mostly intact, but because come lambing season, you will need secure pens. You gather fallen branches from the hedgerow, trim them with your knife, and weave them between the upright posts. Your hands are stiff, your fingers clumsy with cold, but you work slowly, evenly. Each weave is a small act of faith, not in the weather, but in your own ability to respond when the time comes. You teach your eldest to recognize the signs of thaw. Watch the brook, you say, your voice soft and used to full sentences. When the ice cracks in the center and steam rises, the ground is softening. You show them how to test the soil. Press a finger into the bank. If it yields, even slightly, roots can take hold. You point to the crows returning, the lengthening shadows, the way the snow melts first on the south side of the oak. They listen. They do not interrupt. They store the knowledge like grain in a dry place for use when needed. You check your tools again. The hoe, the spade, the wooden rake. All dry, all intact. You rub tallow into the wooden handles to keep them from splitting when the work begins in earnest. You sharpen the iron tips with a river stone, not to a gleam, but to functionality. These tools will not last forever, but they will last long enough. Inside the cottage, your spouse begins to air the bedding. Not all at once, too risky in lingering cold, but a corner of the blanket each day, hung near the fire to draw out the damp. You do the same with your tunics, your hose, your gloves. Dry wool is warmer. Warmth is life. You do not speak of the child who did not wake. You do not need to. Their absence is woven into every silence, every extra spoonful of pottage you do not take, every time your eldest works a little harder, a little longer. But you do not stop. You prepare. You continue. You live. Because readiness is the only form of hope you can afford. You do not expect the earth to reward you. You expect only to be ready, when it remembers how to wake. So you sharpen the scythe. You seal the seed chest. You mend the fence. You prepare, without promise, because preparation itself is survival. And as the pale sun dips below the western ridge, painting the snow in soft rose and gray, you bank the fire, check the door, and wait, not for spring, but for the next sign that the world has not forgotten how to turn. You do not think of yourself as a survivor, not in the way others might imagine, standing triumphant over hardship, arms raised in defiance, eyes blazing with hard-won wisdom. There is no triumph here, no defiance, only the quiet, unbroken repetition of what must be done. Survival, for you, is not a moment. It is not a story. It is a habit. It is rising before light because your body knows the cost of lying still too long. It is measuring grain by palm width because the sack grows lighter each week. It is mending the same tunic for the third winter because cloth is too precious to replace. You do not keep tally of your endurance. You do not mark days on a wall beyond what is needed to track seed cycles or holy feasts. You do not look back and say, I have lasted this long. You only look forward and ask, what must be done today? And today, as every day, the answer is simple. Prepare, endure, continue. You walk to the strip again, though the earth is still too cold to sow. You do not plow. You walk. You check the furrows for erosion from last week's meltwater. You kick loose stones to the edge. You test the soil with your fingers, still firm, but less brittle. You do this not because it changes anything immediately, but because it reminds you of your place. You are here. You are tending. You are ready. Your hands know the work even when your mind drifts. They card wool without your full attention. They stitch tears without counting stitches. They grind grain with a rhythm so deep it lives in your bones. This is not skill alone. It is habit, worn smooth by repetition, as a river stone is shaped by water. You do not think about how to tie your shoes. You do not pause to recall how to coax fire from embers. Your body remembers, and your body is your most faithful companion. You do not speak of legacy. You do not wonder if your name will be remembered, because you know it will not. No one records the lives of those who card wool, mend shoes, turn soil, and watch their children sleep. And that is as it should be. Legacy belongs to lords and saints. You belong to the earth, to the cycle, to the quiet continuity of ordinary life. Your eldest learns the same habits. They rise without being called. They eat without complaint. They card wool with clumsy fingers that grow steadier each day. They do not ask, why must we do this? They do not need to. They see you do it. They see your spouse do it. They understand in their bones that this is how life is lived. There will be no monument to you, no song, no stone with your name carved in it. But your eldest will one day card wool by a fire of their own, their hands moving with the same rhythm you taught them. They will check the harness on an ox with the same quiet care. And in that you live on, not in memory, but in motion, in habit. You do not fight the world. You move with it. You bend with the wind. You store grain when there is plenty. You tighten your belt when there is not. You do not rage against the cold. You layer wool. You do not curse the short days. You light the fire earlier. You do not mourn the child lost to cough. You hold the one who remains closer. This is not resignation. It is adaptation. It is the quiet intelligence of those who understand that survival is not about winning, but about lasting. At dusk, you stand in the doorway and look east. The sky holds light longer now. The snow on the path cracks more easily underfoot. The crow calls again from the oak. These are not miracles. They are signs, and you read them not with hope, but with readiness. You go inside. You feed the fire. You stir the pot. You check your eldest. You do not pray for spring. You prepare for it, because survival is not a victory shouted from a hilltop. It is a hand placed gently on a child's forehead in the dark. It is a stone kicked from a furrow. It is a stitch pulled tight in a worn tunic. It is showing up day after day, not because you believe the world will reward you, but because stopping is not an option. And so you continue, not as a hero, not as a martyr, but as a person who knows the weight of a grain sack, the feel of cold earth, the sound of a child's breath in the night. You are not remembered, but you are here, and for now, that is enough. You have come to the end of this winter's journey. The fire in the cottage has burned low once more. The snow still lies deep on the fields, but the light lingers longer each evening. The crow calls from the oak. The ice on the well bucket cracks more easily at noon. And you are still here, listening as the last embers of this long night fade into quiet. This story was never meant to inspire you. It was meant to accompany you. In a world that shouts for your attention, with bright screens, urgent notifications, promises of transformation, this history offers something quieter, presence. The presence of those who endured not through heroism, but through routine, who survived not by escaping hardship, but by weaving it into the fabric of daily life. You may have drifted in and out during these hours. Perhaps your eyes closed. Perhaps your thoughts wandered to your own struggles, your own quiet winters, seasons of waiting, of rationing, of holding on. That was always allowed. The story did not leave you. It waited, as it has waited for centuries in the crackle of a hearth, in the rhythm of a quern stone, in the slow breath of a child sleeping through the cold. And if you woke again, you found yourself still here, on the same straw pallet, in the same dim room, surrounded by the same unbroken rhythm of ordinary survival. Now, as we close, let your breath deepen, let your shoulders soften, let the weight of this history settle around you like a well-worn blanket, because you're not in that cottage. You're not grinding grain with stiff hands. You're not rationing the last handful of barley or listening for a child's cough in the dark. You are safe, wherever you are, in your bed, on your couch, in a room warmed by invisible heat and lit by the steady glow of electric light. You are held by comforts those villagers could not imagine. Clean water flows at the turn of a tap. Food waits in a box that hums with cold. Medicine quiets fevers before they deepen. You do not measure your survival in logs burned or breath shared. Do not feel guilt for this comfort. Feel gratitude. And from that gratitude, rest. Rest without urgency. Rest without the need to be productive, to achieve, to become. Rest in the knowledge that for this moment, you are not fighting just to stay alive. This is the quiet gift of history told slowly. It does not demand your energy. It offers its own. It says, you are not alone in your weariness. Others have carried heavier loads with less support and still found the strength to rise one more morning. The men and women of medieval winters were not saints. They were not heroes. They were simply people, like you, who faced long nights, short rations, and uncertain futures and chose again and again to do the next small thing, to light the fire, to mend a shoe, to walk to the well. And in doing so, they built a kind of dignity that does not need monuments to be real. Now, as you prepare to sleep or to return to your day, carry this with you. Stillness is not failure. Repetition is not meaningless. And endurance, in its quietest form, is worthy of respect. The sleepy historian does not say goodbye, only good night. And if you seek another long evening of quiet history, if you wish to walk another frozen road, tend another hearth, watch another dawn rise over a world that does not hurry, you will find the same voice waiting. Calm, steady, unhurried, because history does not rush, and neither do we. Now let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the last echoes of creaking timber and crackling flame fade into the rhythm of your own breath. You are warm. You are safe. You are home. Sleep well.